Hello, welcome to our next video at the City of London Police Museum. My name is Kim Biddulph and I'm joined by Martin Murtaugh. Say hi, Martin.
Hi, how you doing?
And Debbie Linson. Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
Thank you very much for joining me to talk about a very important aspect of the City of London Police Museum, because a lot of people don't really know that we exist. This is at the entrance to our museum here, this picture of all these Edwardian police officers. And of course, the police museum is closed at the moment as we speak in the end of 2020, and hopefully will reopen in 2021 at some point. But a lot of people don't know that the City of London has its own police service. And obviously that's what we talk about quite a lot in the museum. But as the museum is not closed, we want to talk to you online. So we're going to talk to why the City of London Police Service is separate to the other police service in London known as the Metropolitan Police. You may have heard of them. We've got to have a look, I think, first of all, at the City of London. And this is a map that shows the size of the City of London, and that you can see it's very, very tiny there in the centre, that little black spot which is enlarged down at the bottom on the River Thames. And the City of London has a very long history, doesn't it, Martin?
Absolutely. So if we look at going right back in time, medieval City of London, it was a fortified town on the north banks of the Thames, with a Roman wall protecting the city on three sides. Now, even then, there were constables of a type. At night, curfew will be rung, and the constables would arm themselves with swords and longbows to guard the city until daybreak. But if we move a little bit further into the 16th century, the city was divided into specific areas known as wards, and they still exist today. And men from each ward were obliged to act as a watchman for a period of at least a year. And this was known as the watch and ward system. These were early policemen. They weren't paid, they were badly trained, and it was the responsibility of the city aldermen to ensure that each man in his ward took their turn in being a watchman. This system lasted until the 19th century, and the watchmen took their duties on in addition to their day jobs. So what they would actually do would appoint deputies that made the policing even more unreliable. Again, into the 17th century, an act was passed whereby at least 1,000 men would be on duty every night. And these were known as Charlies after King Charles II. And they were, again, badly paid. They were often old and frail. They would be equipped with a lantern and a wooden stick. And they were actually a source of ridicule. Again, badly trained. And the general public did not have much respect for them. There is a cartoon, basically.
We'll show you that bit later, won't we?
Yes, so that was known as the cartoons. It's called A Slap of the Charlies, and it depicts Sir Robert Peel, who was the then Home Secretary, putting flight to a bunch of elderly watchmen with their hats falling off, two flattened onto the ground. It lampoons the ineffective force. Or is this more of a political message? I'm not sure, but it does show how ineffective the Charlies were.
Yeah, they were perceived to be. But if we go back a little bit, you start with the medieval stuff that you were talking about. Yeah. We go back to William the Conqueror, and when he came to London and he was crowned in London in 1066. And starts building, of course, the Tower of London and all that stuff right on the edge of the city. The City of London was already well established by that point, wasn't it? It was a couple of 100 years old, and well fortified, like you said, and the city was run by the burgesses, who later became known as aldermen within the city. But the king did have a royal official there as well to look after the port of London, because it was obviously a way that could bring him in taxes and things like that. But the King William I did give this charter to the City of London in 1067 to guarantee them their rights and their freedom, basically. So you can see that it's written there. It's got his seal underneath it, which is it survives only a little bit, and this is in the London Metropolitan Archives. And he says that William the King friendly salutes William the Bishop and Godfrey the Portreeve, and the Portreeve was the royal appointment, and all the burgesses within London, both French and English. So it was quite a diverse place even at the time. And I declare that I grant you all to be law-worthy, as you were in the days of King Edward, and he means King Edward the Confessor, in the beginning of the 11th century. And I grant that every child shall be his father's heir after his father's days, which means that he won't just take people's land from them, that it will continue in the family inheritance. And I will not suffer any person to do you wrong. God keep you. So this is a very important part of this story of why the City of London has its own police force, because he's basically saying if you are law worthy, which means that this is something that the City of London Corporation later on, as we'll find out, has taken to mean that they already had their law system set up with a watch and ward, as Martin described, all the way up to magistrates, so that they could deal with the court as well. So this is a very important part of that that history, and it gives them, it's almost like it is a charter, it gives them this right. But by the late 18th century and into the early 19th century, this kind of idea about the rubbish Charlies and the rubbish watchmen was a little bit unfair, don't you think, Martin? Because they had organised themselves quite well.
Absolutely. I mean, as you say, or as you can see here, you have the night watch and the day police. So the City of London, they started to become slightly more effective with recording elements of any crimes that were taking place. So within the book, you'll see who was on duty that night, and they would then record any incident that took place. So it was becoming a force that was actually getting to be much more organised. The named constables were allocated to a morning or an evening patrol, and basically that would be along with 18 named watchmen. And the incidents or the occurrences were recorded within the watch book. If I can just quote one. So at 9:30 this evening, Cunning the inspector came to the watch house and said the part of the hoardings in front of the yard in Thomas Street had begun to fall down with timber, laying down in the street. So something quite simple, that there was this timber that had fallen over, and it's actually recorded in the watch in the book. Yeah. So yeah, it is becoming more effective, and so that's then leading on to the early City of London Police, as I said, becoming a much more effective force.
Yeah, and as you say, the city was originally divided into the wards for the police, but by the 1830s, the early 1830s, it was divided into slightly bigger districts, wasn't it? And they actually had these watch houses, which would be similar to police stations. They had quite a good setup with superintendent and a chief officer, inspectors, sergeants, constables. So yeah, they were quite well organised, and they knew it. Actually, I'll tell you that a little bit later. And this is the cartoon that you mentioned, the Slap at the Charlies, which was painted by William Heath in 1829. What happened in 1829?
So in 1829, this is when basically Robert Peel starts to form the Metropolitan Police. And as you said at the beginning, Kim, that, to this day, the City of London Police is a completely separate entity to the Metropolitan Police. I can help you find a place if you turn. And basically, so Robert Peel allowed that as long as the City of London or the corporation would support his acts in Parliament. So this is where we had the two entities. Now, at this point, the City of London Police were not formally identified as such. So in 1829, we've got a Metropolitan Police, and we still have this like informal policing of the city.
Yes, and then 10 years later, Robert Peel tries again and in fact, Lord John Russell, who was the Home Secretary, tried to put forward another Metropolitan Police bill that would expand the Metropolitan Police area and include the city in that district. And this again sent the city up in arms, and they appealed to the Queen, to Queen Victoria herself, who was only she was very young, she was only 19 at the time. But this is the start of their petition to her in 1839. So when this next bill came through, and this is what they're saying: prior to the Norman conquest, the citizens of London possessed and exercised the important right and privilege of electing their own magistrates and of providing for the preservation of the peace of the city by the appointment of proper officers for keeping the watch and ward within the city. King William I, by his charter, granted and secured to the citizens of London the integrity of their rights, customs and franchises as fully and freely as they were enjoyed in the days of King Edward the Confessor. So the basis of their outcry and outrage and need to have their own force, their own police service, they based it all on this charter of King William I. I can go on and say that later on they say that they've established a police in the City of London fully adequate to its wants and equal, if not superior, to the Metropolitan Police. So they did have a very high opinion of their police service by that point, or at least they were trying to make other people believe that. They also said that they thought that this was to include the City of London area in the Metropolitan Police was destructive to the rights of the citizens of London, but dangerous to the Constitution because it involves the principle of centralisation that is in opposition to the liberties of the people. So they were really laying it on thick, and the Queen assented to the petition and asked Lord John Russell to put together another bill that would protect the City of London and give it its own kind of professional police force. And they all had the honour of kissing Her Majesty's hand as well, which is nice. Which takes us on to these debates in Parliament, because there was, I mean, obviously the City of London had some things to say, but the utility of having the two forces merge was something that everybody could see, couldn't they, Debbie? But and so there were lots of debates in Parliament about that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So like you were saying, so by this stage, like you were saying, they had some powerful allies in the city. They had the Queen of England, Victoria, who was only 18 then, so she's very young. They also had the then Home Secretary. And I mean, these extracts are interesting because there's an extract from Robert Peel as well here. And he's explaining why in 1829 he didn't include the city in the Metropolitan Police Act when the Metropolitan Police were established. So I think the slide that Martin was showing, the slap of the Charlies, does show quite nicely how much opposition there had been to introducing a police service in the UK, not just from the powerful people, like people in the city, but also, you know, other people in society as well. And they're very suspicious about it. And the city put up a good argument for why they should have their own police service. And if I read, shall I read these verbatim? If I read,
Yeah.
So these are extracts from debates in Parliament. This is what Sir Robert Peel had to say. So this is about, so it was August 1839, the City of London Police Act. So it's 3 months before the Act was brought in. And he says, I did consent that the City of London should not be included within its Metropolitan Police Act operation, i.e. the Metropolitan Police, then, i.e. in 1829, as now. The ancient privileges of the City of London were powerfully pleaded in exemption. Prejudices were awakened respecting interference with the ancient rights of freemen, and eventually the anomaly was established by which we behold a small civic district, the population which does not exceed 58,000 or 60,000 inhabitants, so not very many, permitted to be arbitrary, governed by its own police, or a system different and distinct from that which the peace and security of the whole surrounding district are preserved. So he's explaining there again in Parliament why he didn't include the city in 1829. And he's mentioning, like you mentioned, the charter, he's mentioning their ancient rights.
But he also says that he thinks it's silly, doesn't he, really? It does seem ridiculous that there is this anomaly where they're arbitrarily governing their own police in a different system. Yeah,
in a completely different system. And but he's still supporting them, and I think probably because as a politician, you know, who's a very adept politician who brought in a lot of widespread changes, not just to policing, and I think he knew in 1829 he very much needed the support of the city behind him to get the Metropolitan Police Act through, and so he's still sort of capitulating, I would say, maybe not completely on board, but so this is what he presented. And so you mentioned the petition to Queen Victoria there. Lord John Russell, so he was the then Home Secretary, wasn't he? And this is how he stated his opinion was, having sort of debated it and heard the views of the city. So I'll read this out again. And actually, this is paraphrased. It says, his position had been, and still was, so that's Lord Russell's Home Secretary, that it would be much better to have one police for the whole metropolis, so to merge them in accordance with the report of the committee. But he also concurred with the right honourable gentleman the other evening in thinking that as the very great outcry had been raised in the city against the introduction of the bill, it was probable that if it was forced on the city, the commissioners of the police would not have that authority or be so well received in the city as was requisite, as was necessary, in order to secure the public the full benefits of the Act. This he considered a sufficient reason for waiving what he thought would be a very great improvement. So he's saying there, I think, that he would have liked them to merge, and it would have been an improvement. But again, there's almost an element of fear in there, isn't there?
Yeah, and they say that, you know, if they did merge, then the citizens of the City of London would be so against it that they would, you know, it would mean that any benefits would be negated. So yeah, it's interesting what they're seeing their debates at the various readings of this bill as it progressed through Parliament.
I mean, I would say back then it wasn't so strange to have a small police service like that. So today it seems very small. But historically, I mean, in the 19th century, there were over 200 police forces, maybe up to 250. And they were gradually amalgamated over the years. It went down to 117 in the I think it was the 1946 Police Act, and then down again to 47 in the 64 Police Act. So it probably didn't seem quite so strange then to have a small force like that, but it is a police force within a, no other city had this at the centre of it.
So eventually, as you say, in August 1839, the City of London Police Act was passed, and I think there you go. There's the front page of that act by the Queen. Obviously, she had to sign these acts for regulating the police in the City of London. And what's interesting is the preamble of this. Have you got this? So it says that there was an act in the 10th year of the reign of King George II for better regulating the nightly watch and beadles. And it basically repeals that act and replaces it with this one. So, there had been a system of kind of reforming the police over the 100 years before. But this was really the establishment of the professional police. One of the interesting things that I like in the Act is the 3rd article, which says that the mayor, aldermen and commons shall appoint a fit person, subject to the approval of Her Majesty, to be the commissioner of the police force of the City of London, and that they can remove the commissioner in cases of misconduct, and they could replace the commissioner if the commissioner retires or resigns or needs to be removed, but with the approval of the Queen at this point, and obviously later on the Crown. So instead of being managed by the government and a minister in the government, the alderman and the mayor of the City of London basically manage the City of London Police.
Yes, they're keeping the power and control that they were worried about losing. They still kept it.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, sorry, it just popped forward there. Did you see anything else interesting in the City of London Police Act when you were looking through it, either of you?
I think, we were talking about the effectiveness of the police and how it was ineffective at first. And even as we go into the mid-19th century, they had a recruitment drive. And basically, apparently, it was men low in height and old in years and with little character were applying for the roles. And we go back to what I was saying earlier about, the watchmen, and they weren't trained, they were badly trained, they weren't paid. So what the City of London Police started to do now was to go for the ideal candidates. So applicants had to be under 40 years. They had to be of a certain height. So the City of London Police, compared to the Metropolitan Police, they were taller. And basically, they also had to have the ability to read. But however, poor wages and conditions meant that the average length of service was about 4 years. And again, further improvements took place whereby, from a social perspective, they were given housing, they were given a form of healthcare. So the actual period of service actually increased over the period of time.
Yes, but the complaints about pay went on for quite a while, didn't they? And Debbie, were there other attempts to amalgamate the two forces in later years?
There were several other attempts. I mean, in 1863, I think Sir George Grey tried to amalgamate them again, and there was an attempt before then as well, I think. And about 3,000 merchants and bankers went to the Guildhall and put up a big, fight against this. And again, the government had to back down about this. I mean, the subject does still come up today, actually. I was thinking about this relatively recently, not just about the city. There's quite often a discussion about should the police services amalgamate in some way. There was a report in 2005 called Closing the Gap by HMIC that talked about amalgamating the forces, and this was quite largely resisted, I think. But yeah, there were attempts again to try and merge historically the City of London Police with the Met, but they have remained separate.
And I think that whenever this comes up, it's the same argument is used, that the City of London's ancient rights and privileges mean that they continue to have control over their own police force.
I mean, obviously, they must collaborate all the time with the Met, and with better
Yeah.
communications today, you know, does it really matter?
Yes.
I mean, I was just going to say that basically, whilst there are two independent forces, and you also have the British Transport Police, and then you have the River Police.
Yeah.
You know, they do collaborate and they do work together. And you know, we will have the Metropolitan Police coming into the City of London when we have, you know, if there's big demonstrations, etc., or even terrorist events. So, absolutely, that collaboration is still there.
Yeah, and it has always been there throughout its history. Well, thank you very much, Martin and Debbie, for talking to me about this and your research into the history of the formation of the City of London Police.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will be producing some more videos as well, with the Metropolitan Police Heritage Service themselves, so that we can talk about how the two forces have collaborated and worked together, as well as why they and explore a little bit more why they're still separate. So look out for that. In the meantime, if you want to find out more about us, you can find our website, cityoflondon.gov.uk/police museum, and you can find out our email address on there if you want to email us. We're on Twitter at COL Police Museum, and you can find us on Facebook if you search for City of London Police Museum as well. So do let us know what you think of the video, and we hopefully will be able to respond in later talks.